Hi everyone, we've got an awesome episode of the Athletic Development Show for you today. Special guest Karl Goodman. This one's a two-parter. He had so much stuff to talk about that we went across two episodes. Karl deep dives into some great stuff here about business, about training, and a lot of the stories behind his success. And for those of you that don't know, he is the other half of the founding team, or he's actually the founder of Athletes Authority. Great episode, well worth a listen. Lots of great nuggets of information here. Welcome to the Athletic Development Show, proudly brought to you by Iron Edge. Very excited today to have our guest Karl Goodman on the show, founder and director at Athletes Authority. He's a great thinker, a great doer, and it's going to be a great conversation. Really looking forward to it. Karl, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. I know you spoke to Lockie last week and got some insights into the programming side and Lockie's journey. It's great to give you the context of my side today.
Yeah, I think it's one of the interesting things is that Lockie is in the limelight, and rightly so. But also, I'm really interested to talk to very much a business brain like yours, because you've been driving this business for a long time and done amazing things with it. So it's good to chat to you as well. Firstly, how are you going? You've just, life's all happening for you. You've just had a baby. Your business is in lockdown. How are you going with all of that side of things?
Well, it depends if you're asking personal Karl or business Karl. Personal Karl is obviously going great because I've got asking Karl as a whole. Well, personal Karl, from I was saying to you before off air. If we were ever going to have a lockdown, I would want it to be after a newborn, because it's going to limit your ability to do things anyway when you've got a newborn. So being at home has been a gift for Nikki and I. Obviously, I've got an older boy as well. It's been difficult. We're in a position, I think, similar to you, where it's a 5K radius, which essentially, if ever the socioeconomics and where you choose to live has impacted, it's going to impact you in lockdown. Yeah. Because you've got people who within 5Ks have access to beaches, have access to incredible cafes, etc. And then you have people who might live in a different socioeconomic area or choose to invest in a different home or live somewhere else. So they could, live in a home in which, in this is my case, we moved out southwest Sydney. So we could essentially have a really lovely home. And the downside would always be I'd have to travel to work, which was in the city.
Yeah, right.
And that was great until lockdown occurred. So it's challenging, and I have some interesting thoughts on it. Everyone says we're all in the same boat, we're all in this together. The way I describe it to people is we're actually in the same storm.
Yes.
Some people are on yachts, some people are on lifeboats, and some people are trying to find a life vest. Yeah. And I would describe Nikki and myself as probably more so being on a lifeboat. We certainly do not have it as bad as some who I know are really struggling. Single parent families where now the father can't work, has 2 or 3 kids to look after as well as his wife, and is now on a $750 government handout as opposed to feeling like he's in control and being the provider for his family. I can't imagine what that's like. Because it will be exceptionally difficult, and can't imagine what it's like for us. We are in southwest Sydney. We're in a what's considered a hotspot, and it's difficult. We're very much restrained into what we can do and how we can live our life day to day. And comparing to someone who lives on Bondi Beach, it's a different experience. But personally, it is. I know we say it is what it is, but I don't like to say that, because another way you could say is what it is we can't do anything about it. And maybe, perhaps it's better to think actually still is a lot we can control. But it's been an interesting time. Obviously, we're experiencing now what you guys have known for quite some time. I think it's in surplus of 200 days. You'll tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's more than 200 days.
Of lockdowns to varying degrees.
Been bonkers. And how locked down are you? So you're still allowed to train people in the car park?
So we're down to 2 people at a time. Can train outdoors for an hour a day.
Yeah, right. So it's still pretty limited.
What that's essentially meant for us is we have an outdoor area in our car park, which is undercover. We have the coach sitting indoors, and then we have 2 athletes training outside, and we're viewing them from a distance. It is frustrating, obviously, to not be as involved and not to support the training process and what it might be. And obviously, it's difficult sometimes to look at the science, which seems to indicate that outdoor transmission is negligible, if not none at all, and to know that exercise is being hampered in the way it is. But it's what we've been gifted, it's what we've been granted, it's what we've been told we can do. So yeah, that's happening from that side. Obviously, where I'm inside, as you can tell, in the facility right now, physio is still permissible. So
that's great.
We are leveraging physio as much as we can. The physios are working their butts off, if I'm allowed to use that language on
you can swear on the podcast, and that's not even there yet.
Cool. Nova's told us that we should try and keep swearing to a minimum, so I never wanted to assume. But yeah, we're leveraging physio as much as we can since it's permissible. This is a shell of what it was. I'm glad that everyone who's currently here has been able to experience what we are and who we are normally. We've certainly been averse to helping new athletes unless it's very unique circumstances, because they're buying an inferior product right now. Training outdoors without coach engagement, without the culture, without all the additions and the support that we normally provide is not something you really want to start a new experience with a new athlete with. So that's certainly come to a halt, and I know you know all about that. It's not just that your business isn't operating. Your business needs to grow, and if it doesn't grow, it's actually shrinking. Because time's continuing. And this is one of the challenges.
It's not in actual hibernation.
Yeah, exactly. Because business projections and forecasting has some critical assumptions that there is growth involved. So it's not just that you're putting a pause on everything. You're also, pushing out your projections.
Yeah,
and your future earnings.
It's a really important point. Like, if we I think this is what a lot of people don't understand. If we just were able to put a pause on everything, I would be so relaxed. I'd be like, cool, put the pause button. Let's go write some stuff, hang out. You got hijinks going in the background. Hang out and have a good time. But it's not a pause button because the rent isn't being paused. The wages aren't being paused. Yeah, exactly.
Your leases on equipment aren't paused. Your insurances aren't paused. Your cost of goods sold, you don't get that money back from your inventory just sitting there.
It's a whole thing. And there's so many more costs than people realise. I loved listening to your podcast, the Origins one, where you went through the cost of setting up the business. That was one of the most joyful things for me, to hear someone else tell exactly the same story I'd gone through. And you're like, everything costs so much money. Like, I loved that you had a parking inspector guy. It was parking engineer. Like, it's bonkers.
Yes, they called them traffic engineers. I didn't even know that was a thing. But evidently it is, and their goal, their job is to approve and validate parking spaces. So the allocation that you've given to a parking space, even though the council engineer has eyeballs and can see it.
Yeah, it's just
so there are all these extraneous costs that when you're doing your forecasting, your projections, and your business plan, no, you don't think about that, and that's why I'm probably contrary to the idea that business plans even provide much utility, because in reality, your business plan gets thrown out the window because you cannot possibly factor for every variable that's going to go into actually building out the business, unless it's like maybe a software as a service or something like that, where maybe you can control the controls a bit more. But it's I'm glad that resonated with you.
Oh my god, yeah.
So, it's a real experience for all us gym owners is to go through that.
And the reality is, and look, if you listen to this and you're not listening to the AA podcast. Go back and listen to it at some point because it's so good. It's really worth listening to. But the reality is yours actually went quite well also. So, for instance, for us, we had one of our neighbours across the road object to our planning permit, and that cost us 3 months of paying full rent while that went through its process. And we got lucky because the town planner took our side and overruled the objection. Like, it could have gone...
Was this a residential?
This was no industrial area. They just objected to us taking up car parks. Yeah, it always comes back to car parking. But yeah, so we had that and all sorts of other things. I mean, we even had to spend $2,000 for an environmental audit where a man literally came in and he looked up at the lights and he said, "Do you have any aircon?" And I said, "Just in the offices." And he said, "Cool." And he left, and I got an invoice for $2,000. Like, it's just crazy.
And it's with all these things considered, right? With all these costs that, hopefully with more education, people start to appreciate. You know what everyone still wants to negotiate? Their gym membership.
Yeah.
Everyone still wants to bargain down the old gym owner who has sold houses so that they can open this thing because it's something they're so passionate about.
Borrowed against their life insurance policy.
Yeah. All these things, all the available equity that you might have personally, you leverage so you can start this thing. And then the first thing people want to negotiate or commoditize is the price of your gym membership, which is... Anyway, we can talk about that.
Let's talk about that because I'm a real chicken shit when it comes to price, and I've let our company down with that. And it wasn't until we had an intervention with our team, and the team actually sat me down and they said, "We're not charging enough. You're killing us." And one of I think it was Pat may have said to me, "We're cheaper than F45, Durham." And I was just like, whoa, I really needed to take stock that my personal bias of wanting to kind of give training away to anyone, because I always had this idea of, like I want the son of a truck driver to be able to come along here. I think you have had and the fundamental problem with that is that you're not going to be in business very long, so you can't help anyone, let alone, the son of a truck driver. You've had a much better perspective on that. How do you think about price and how do you talk about price?
Okay. Well, where to start? Okay, I'm going to start with the fundamentals of business. What do you think the fundamental thing that a business needs to do?
Stay alive.
Stay alive, so survival. I agree. More so than that. The job of a business is to turn a profit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That is the number one of a business. Now, immediately, for a subgroup of the population, perhaps you felt like this for a long time, Durham, was that you don't deserve a profit. Perhaps profiting off people is not something that you wanted to do. Now, I can't speak for you, but I can certainly speak for me.
That's reasonably accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to do great things, but I didn't want to profit off people. Yeah.
Sure. So I felt that way too. I remember coming across something from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I think it was Charlie Munger who said it. He's like, the way you need to look at profit is if a business is profiting, it is contributing more to the world than the resources it's taking away from it. It's contributing more to the world than the resources it takes away.
That's pretty profound.
And that hit me in a very, very powerful way. And that happened probably in about 2018 after 2 and a bit years of struggle after struggle after struggle, which manifested itself in many different ways. But I remember in 2016 when I was down to my final $2,000 in the bank account. Lockie is yet to invest in the business at this point in time.
Wow.
Shit got real, if you don't mind me speaking in such basic terms. And I realized for me that I had some fundamental work to do on my own to fix my money issues. And I had some very deep-seated money issues. My mum divorced my dad when I was 2 years old. They lost the family home because he mismanaged the money, kept my mum out of the equation, and gambled and drunk money away until the bank repossessed the home. So my grandparents lost their contribution, which was 50% contribution to this home. My mum lost her contribution, and obviously dad lost his. And so my mum left him. And so for the next 6 years, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in southwest Sydney in a suburb called Narwee in what can only be described as housing commission style apartments.
Wow.
So I was brought up that money was a scarce resource. I was brought up that I was probably undeserving, and I certainly had, back then, and maybe only through maturity do I really appreciate it, is that I certainly felt abandoned by my dad. And I certainly had spent a lot of time feeling worth very little. And I even saw that manifest even as an adult personal training. I was the first person to capitulate to any bartering or bargaining. And I tell this story to my staff. I had a business owner approach me for some training. He's a very close friend of mine now, and he was one of my first real mentors. He sold his business, his regional flying business, to Qantas, and he made many digits of millions from that sale. I got this email that was forwarded to me by the PT manager at the gym I was at the time saying, hey, you might want to look after this guy. He's looking for 5 mornings a week, 6 a.m. He wants to turn up 6 a.m. every morning of the week. I was like, great, that sounds good. Mark sends me this email. We go to and fro, and my prices were about $70 to $80.
For an hour?
Somehow, this is in 2008 per hour. Okay. Somehow he negotiated me down to $40 per hour. And he bought a 50 pack or maybe a 100 pack. I think he bought a 100 pack.
Yep.
I was convinced at the time that I needed the cash flow. I was a new PT at this facility. So I took it. And it didn't take me long to realize I had just sold my most valuable time slot.
Prime time.
For $40 per hour to someone who, when he was in Sydney, wanted to train every day, but every second week was traveling.
Wow.
So it actually just sold my most valuable slot for $20 per hour because I couldn't actually get anyone else in for those times because it was a 1 week on, 1 week off type arrangement. And that this is 2008. That type of decision making would perpetuate to about 2017, 2018, where I would discount myself, and there was clearly something going on. When I started AA, and I don't tell many people this, when AA was open, it was officially a gym. I had Mind Body software. I had a gym membership as a product that people would subscribe to. The initial iteration of Athletes Authority was a donation. It was, you tell me what you think I'm worth.
Really?
I was that tarnished and jaded by money that I could not even put a price on it. But you know what would happen? Someone would flick me $10 every couple of weeks, and then I'd hate them. Then I'd resent them.
Yeah.
Because how dare they value me so little?
And yet you hadn't set a value. Yeah.
They were simply mirroring my own beliefs of myself.
Yeah.
So when fast forward back to 2018, Charlie Munger, he's big on mental models. He's big on systems of thinking. He really helped me realize that I shouldn't be ashamed of profit. In fact, it should be my goal, because if it is my goal, I know that I'm contributing more to the people I care about than the resources I'm taking. to make that happen.
And we do get shamed a lot within it. I think and I held this belief for a long time that if I really cared about being a purist, a real coach, then it was not about anything else other than the strength of my coaching. And I think there's a thing in sports as well where sometimes sports will think someone's trying to profit off their sport. So it's like someone's trying to, milk their culture is kind of how it feels. Well, it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? It's that I think is not unique, but is definitely more prevalent in our space.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's healthy.
No.
Like I honestly don't believe it's healthy, but maybe it's ingrained in service-based industries. Maybe it's just something that that people like us who are really building businesses on relationships. Even our business, your business, it's relationships at scale is what we're actually doing. Maybe that makes it harder for us to really put a price on the value of what we're worth. But then when you think about it, if you were to ask a 13 or a 14-year-old and the parents of a 13 or 14-year-old, what would you do? And what would you pay if you could know your son or your daughter is doing everything they can to represent their country? What would you pay for that? They'd say anything. That anything I possibly could afford, I would put towards that because I know it's their dream and I want to see my son or daughter succeed. I want to do everything. That's what we want to do as parents. So, we've got this dissonance between charging for the result, which most people don't do. Most trainers and coaches don't charge for the results they provide, they charge for their time, which is a huge mistake because time is not what you're trading. You're trading an outcome. Certainly if you believe in your effectiveness as a coach, or your effectiveness as a facility, you're trading the result. And that result is worth a lot more.
And the accumulated IP that you had to develop to deliver that result. There was a great quote. I think it was from it was about a surgeon, and someone asked them, was that the surgeon or a really good builder? One or the other. It was someone with a high technical skill. I can't remember which it was, but they charged quite a bit of money for a service they delivered. And they're like, "Oh, that only took you 5 minutes." And the retort was, "Yeah, but it took me 20 years to learn the knowledge to be able to do that in 5 minutes. Like you've just paid for that." Yeah.
I think it's actually a plumber's quote.
Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's someone's got a leaking toilet and their sewage is flowing all over the bathroom.
Yeah. Right.
And then the plumber charges them $1,000. And they're like, "What? You were only here 5 minutes?" And it's like, "Yeah, but it took me 20 years to find out what tap to turn off."
Yeah. All right. So, I might have heard that from you.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's exactly right. When you trade your time, you're discounting the experience, the expertise, and as you mentioned, the IP that got you to that point. If you're simply trading time. The assumption with trading time is that you're unskilled labor and anyone else could do it. If you're trading time, that is the underlying assumption.
It's the base assumption. It's just like driving a taxi or something. Like it's
right.
Just,
it's completely unskilled. It's packing
Which
boxes.
actually is a bad example because that is a bit skilled because you can be a better taxi driver based on knowing where things are. Yeah.
Correct. In the UK, that's quite prevalent. The best taxi drivers happen to be the ones who know the streets better and they they get people there at a faster time and whatnot and know where to not get caught up in bottlenecks. But yeah, it's the fundamental assumption with trading time is it's unskilled labor. So unless you're willing to consider yourself as an unskilled labor hire, then you probably should be pricing yourself away from time and toward a result. Now you can do that very easily by stopping to sell sessions. Don't sell a session ever again.
Best thing we ever did was getting rid of sessions. We after the first lockdown, we were like, nope, there's one membership. You can come as many times as you like. You can come once, you can come 5 times. We don't care. You're paying for the membership, not. We called it the all-in membership, and that was it. There was only one, and it was called all-in. That's the best thing we've ever done in the business, I reckon. Yeah.
Because there's a basic element to that, which is you don't want to disincentivize the right behavior either.
Yeah.
If you're going to get a better outcome and better results through athlete if they come 3 times a week, but you charge per session, then you're disincentivizing, costing them more money for them to do the right thing.
And I actually want to actively discourage the flakes that want to come along once a week. If you want to come along here once a week, you're actually probably going to get a fairly poor result. And then you're going to go out into the world and you can say, I trained at Core Advantage. It was all right. I want that person never to have stepped foot in the door. I'd rather people that are like, I'm going to come 3-4 times a week. Yeah.
There's an opportunity cost to that. What most gym owners and coaches think is, if I don't take this person on, even though they seem to be wanting to create their own rules, someone else will, and I'll lose out on that money. The opportunity cost is that if you don't continue to deliver on their constantly changing expectations of you, the only thing that you end up with is a disgruntled ex-customer who can potentially tarnish your brand through poor referral, through the opposite of referral, through the suggestion to not train with you because you didn't meet their expectations, even though you're delivering on your core product and service.
Well, it's like the online thing, isn't it? Like we were the same as you. We did online because we felt we should, and we hated it, and it wasn't that good an experience. So it's like, actually, we don't really want to do that. It's not a good experience at all. Yeah.
Lockie and I joke, the only 1-star testimonial we have is an online athlete who we signed up during COVID 1.0 because he had his own gym and he was a coach. But we said, look, once we're rock and rolling, you need to integrate into our performance program because that's where we actually coach. That's where we do our coaching. Obviously, it rolls around. He said he was busy with coaching and running his own gym. And his expectation was, just continue to provide the online for me. But that was not our expectation because now we're having to update videos of his continually more demanding exercises and complex exercises. And it got to a point where he said, we're not doing this anymore. You can either join our program or you can leave. And on departure, he left a lovely 1-star review. And that was the only reminder we needed that is the cost of making concessions. When
he kind of gave you a gift.
It's a concession we don't want to make. Absolutely. I'm very thankful of it.
Yeah. So,
very thankful.
So you're influenced by Charlie Munger. Tell me, where have you read his books? Because he's an interesting thinker and less of the limelight than Warren Buffett. Where have you followed his teachings?
Well, he's always appealed to me for probably the same reason that no one really knows who I am, and I kind of like it that way. If you say Berkshire Hathaway, you think Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
If you go to a bookshop, you actually don't find Charlie Munger's books at the bookshop. You find Warren Buffett's books. You find the Buffett way. The system is even the Buffett way.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Warren Buffett has been the face of Berkshire Hathaway. And maybe as they've gotten older, Charlie has probably become more known and more people are familiar with Charlie. But I've always looked at Charlie and Warren as Charlie as a kindred spirit. I resonated with him. He's the guy, when a reporter asks a question at their general meeting, it's always Warren that answers first. And it's Charlie that sits there and he's listening, he's thinking, he'll only add any more if he thinks there's another perspective that Warren hasn't covered. And that's my style. I don't want to be in the limelight. I don't want to have a personal Instagram that people follow. I'm here because I love this brand. I love its vision. I love sport. And I found Lockie, who's my Warren. And I want, and it works. And it works.
That's
so
really good.
I've always really looked, and look, if you look at, there are many examples. Steve Jobs was the face of it, but he always looked up to Steve Wozniak. Wozniak was always the engineer who was always ahead of Steve. Steve was the visionary and he was the face and he was the marketing guy, and he had the experience in sales. I'm not sure if you know much about Steve Jobs, but you know, he would spend his time with his dad on the weekends going to junkyards because his dad was a mechanic and a machinist, and watching his dad sail and make kind of negotiate with you know, buying junk parts to redo cars and you know, make a profit from. So but that was Stephen's experiencing always on the front end, where Steve Wozniak, from my understanding of when I've read their books, Steve's dad said you always want to be in the middle. Right. Never be the guy on the top floor in the ivory tower, and never be the guy on the assembly line. The best thing you can do is be an engineer and be in the middle, because you're the person who makes sure everything keeps working, but you don't need to fuss about the limelight. You don't need to fuss about being on the assembly line. You can just do. And I like that idea.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's how I operate. I operate behind the scenes. I'm not the guy in front of the camera. I don't really want to be. I want to play my role because I know that the other side of the business is more than getting satisfied by Lockie, who's, you know, you've spoken to Lockie.
He's a natural.
He's incredible. He's natural. He's a natural leader. I am his right-hand man. I'm supportive of Lockie, but if I think about, you know, if we were in the army.
Yeah, okay.
I think about that, right?
Yeah,
if we were in the army, I would be an advisor.
Yeah.
He would be walking up and down that front line, getting everyone inspired. It would not be me. I would be the advisor.
You'd be the strategist.
I would help with tactics.
Yeah.
I would understand dynamics of warfare probably, but I would not be the guy on the horse leading the charge. And so it works for us.
That's a great partnership. So you had the relationship with money, you had that epiphany. I had a similar story where I remember there was one time, it was January, which is always when cash flow is low, and our money was so low that I went to pay the wages and we basically had nothing left. And I just went and I lay under the table, like I literally caught up into the fetal position under the table, and I just lay there thinking, what am I going to do? We're gonna die. And we scraped through, and that was a bit of a turning point for me, because I was like, right, I can't live the rest of my life like I'm almost going to die all the time. This is not good for anyone. But it still took a while for me to have that recognition to then take the action to actually create a better model. How did you go with that? So you realized you had an issue with money and that you needed to not discount. How did you then translate that into action?
Okay, there are a few iterations. At 2018, when this really hit home, the culture of Athletes Authority was as bad as it had ever been. And for those who aren't familiar or maybe haven't listened to our podcast to hear that story, I'll give you a brief overview. Despite being an athlete development facility, in reality, we were a powerlifting facility. That's the fundamentals.
Yep.
We're a gym that had primarily powerlifters in it. And sure, I don't want to discredit and say they're not athletes, but they're not athletes in the way that we think about athletic development. They're not field sport athletes, court-based athletes. The gym is where they train, and it's also where they compete. And maybe that's the distinction, right? The gym
is a big distinction.
Athletes in the way. Yeah, it is a big distinction. Yeah. So it was primarily a powerlifting facility, and both Lockie and I, that was not where our heart was, but. Because of preceding events, that's where it was. So we actually were once again gifted by circumstance, perhaps, because all the powerlifters decided to open up a gym down the road. Right. And with that, 80 members departed within a month. Now that was about 70-ish% of our total revenue disappeared. Like over a 1 month period, which was very tough. It was tough, but as I said, in hindsight, it was a gift, really, because Lockie and I were either going to make it happen or we weren't at that point. The team had contracted to 4 people. Myself, Lockie, who was at either Giants or Parramatta, I think he was at Giants in his last year. Seaton, Elliot, and Jess. That was the team. That's all we had. And that really gave us an opportunity to to start again. I know we mentioned this off air, COVID gives you these opportunities to reset. That was certainly a reset for us, and we really had nothing to lose at that point. We had this open canvas. We had a reasonably good facility that was going to be heavily underutilized because everything we'd built the facility was to accommodate powerlifting, and they were all gone. So we had this open blank canvas, and it gave us a chance to really lean in. And I'm pretty sure at the time, Lockie would have said, we just have to knuckle down and really focus on what we truly care about. And so I leveraged some strategies in marketing. It was primarily paid marketing back then.
Was it?
To get the brand out there.
Yeah. Okay.
And we offered, back then, Seaton was leading the program. We offered performance testing for free, I think. I'm pretty sure it was. Or maybe it was $97. I can't remember exactly.
And that was about the time that Jacob and I came up and visited and hung out with you guys, wasn't it? You'd done the clear out relatively recently, and you were just starting your first iteration of the real athlete focus.
Yeah. Perhaps. And I can't remember exactly when that time was.
I know Seaton was there, and I know you mentioned you and Lockie were like, we've just had a big clean out, but you were pretty positive about, all right, it's kind of go time. It was, and you had this. It was a bit of like fingers crossed. We're going to do it this way, and we'll see how it works. It was
that's probably pretty accurate of what was going on. So we drove paid marketing. I leveraged what I had learned.
So Facebook ads,
Facebook ads, Instagram ads. About 65% of our business, maybe even more, was coming from people who had never heard of us before. And we can talk about paid marketing later, but that was able to drive enough new business that we were just able to scrape by on that back end of 2018. Okay. Now, and when I say scrape by, I was personally making $65K a year, $70K a year, something far beneath what I felt like I deserved at that point. I think I actually paid myself less than what I paid the coaches that was my thinking at the time. Which
is a good approach.
Yeah, it's a Simon Sinek idea. Leaders eat last. If you can try and build the team and build the people around you, there will be fruits for you at the end, and we can talk about it too. So paid marketing was a big part of how we kind of rebirthed. It drove a lot of new business in, and it got us to the point where we could hold on, really. But by the end of 2018, I knew that I couldn't do another year by myself. I couldn't lead the team in the way the team needed to be led because I had some blind spots. One of my blind spots was structure. One of my blind spots was probably authority, which is ironic because in the name.
I'll never forget when I asked you about the name, because I was like, your name's genius. How did you think of it? And you're like, just happened.
It just happened, yeah. There is no special story behind it.
It's such a good name.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, I hate our name, Core Advantage, because it makes it sound like a personal training studio. I absolutely hate it. But I really like the logo, and people are attached to it, so it's like, well...
Yeah, and you've got to weigh it up on balance, right? Like, you might not like it, but does it do its job, and what's it worth? Like, if you took the brand away, how would that affect your business? And I would say significantly. Yeah. Because we get people who inquire about basketball here at this facility and mention you as, I know what Durham and the guys do at Core Advantage. So the brand's got weight, obviously. So it's probably worth keeping. But yeah, I noticed
yours is a ripper. I love yours.
Thanks, man. And I knew Lockie needed to come on board. So we really decided that I said, mate, I can't do this another year without you. And we left. And so he left. And originally we were going to raise capital through a buy-in opportunity and selling shares in order to fund Lockie's wage. Because we couldn't actually afford to take someone else in. But once again, by a gift of circumstance, Elliot, who was essentially had two main full-time positions. He had Seaton full-time evening, Elliot full-time morning. And Elliot got a job at Trinity which is a local private school, and we certainly couldn't match what he was getting. And I'm so glad that he made that move. And then Seaton left about a month later because he wanted to start his own Athlete Origins in Canberra.
Right.
And so, by once again, gift of circumstance, there was an opportunity to actually get Lockie in. If he could find a way to take over both those roles, we could essentially make ends meet.
Yeah, great.
In 2019. And so then, 2019 comes through and we have a really, really good year. We had a great year of consistent growth, and because both Sean and Elliot left, it gave us the opportunity to really look at our systems and really make calls if we wanted to keep or replace, and we ended up replacing a fair bit. And we had a great run through 2019, and I think it's where we laid some really incredible foundations for the brand, with Lockie kind of spearheading the performance side of the program. And we'd always said, Athletes Authority needs someone with authority to lead the brand, and I couldn't do it. I'd never been in professional sport. I was a failed athlete. I'd never been a professional. I had no leverage there. I had a vision and I have a skill set, but it certainly wasn't that. So having Lockie there in 2019 was huge. And then, as you know, COVID hit us in March of 2020 is when it really impacted our community and the strength conditioning industry. And we just found a way to leverage it. I don't know of another time in history where there's been that kind of stimulus given to every single business owner. It was just insane. We had Job was a JobKeeper. It was JobKeeper back then, which essentially everyone agreed. There was like universal agreement that everyone would live off $750 a week. It just happened. So everyone was on JobKeeper. Not only through the lockdown, but then for, I think from memory, like 6 months or something afterwards. So our business was able to resume, and then our employment contribution, which is a significant chunk of our expenses, was offset for essentially the rest of the year.
That's a free kick, isn't it? Yeah.
It was a huge free kick.
We didn't get quite so much of that because we were shut so much, but that would have been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was huge, and every business in Sydney was benefiting from that.
Yeah.
And then but that didn't stop there. We got the cash flow boost, and if there are international listeners here, the cash flow boost was essentially any tax withheld for PAYG was given back to you.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. So there was money coming out the wazoo over 2020, and we got locked down for those 3 months. Unlike Melbourne, who spent a lot longer in lockdown, we got to benefit from both of that stimulus because we were open in the months that followed.
Yeah.
And by the time, and a lot of people were in that position. A lot of people had a lot of money. They had nothing to do. Travel, there was no travel. There was really little international travel. So everyone was stuck at home. People had money to splurge. And we had some huge growth over that 2020 calendar year. By the time October, November came around, we were bursting at the seams. There was some serious limitations, and we could sense that there was just a little bit of a disgruntled feeling amongst the athletes because, all of a sudden they were finding it hard to get to equipment.
Yep.
Their training sessions were getting impeded. The culture was great, but there was this friction starting to build just because of the serviceability issues that we were having. So Lockie and I picked up on that, and the rest is history. We're now here.
Well, the new facility, I can't wait to get up and see it. It just looks brilliant. It's literally no stone unturned. It's a dream setup. It's just great.
Yeah, Lockie and I say it's a dream come true. Really,
yeah.
It's taken us 5 years to realize this vision, and we knew it could happen. But it took us 5 years to get here. And, we spoke off air about leveraging capital. We would not be here without the capital stimulus that we got. And we can talk about the role of debt in business growth if you want to.
How do you think about the role of debt? Because the idea of taking on extra debt gives almost everyone the heebie-jeebies. How do you think about that?
I probably have, once again, a contrary perspective to debt. Most people don't have a problem taking on a mortgage. It's a debt.
Yeah.
Mortgage is a debt.
Yep.
And the bank is holding you hostage, and if you don't pay, they'll take back your home. And we spoke about, I've had a unique experience when, you know, at least from the stories that my mum tells me. We are willing to take on debt in some areas of our life because we've been conditioned to think that debt is appropriate in that circumstance. And in the idea of buying a home, you know, debt is a normal thing to do.
Because it's offset by the bricks and mortar, and you can always pull the escape cord and sell the bricks.
Yes, but potentially, if you sell it in a downturn,
you're stuffed.
You may not be able to capture back your liability, and that's why you know there's all these discussions about how much of the house should we loan. 95%. I've seen some 100% loans, or 80% is standard, I guess, and that creates some protection and some buffer. But yeah, we take on debt. So then the way Lockie and I look at it is we had some capital. We also couldn't do what we've done. This is a $500,000 fit out end to end.
Yeah. Wow.
And so we've taken on debt to make that happen, and we're quite transparent about that.
Yeah.
But the business growth that we've seen, even despite our current circumstance, is well and truly justifying the debt we've taken on. You know, obviously we have to map out, well, what's the interest, what are the repayments, what's the term of the loan, and you have to factor that stuff out with your bank and make a call on that. But really, for us to cover the principal and interest was a net growth, assuming no other expenses, which is never true, but let's just assume for hypotheticals that there are no other expenses getting taken on the business, an extra 6 athletes per 6 months.
Well, yeah, you'd be insane not to jump on that, wouldn't you?
You'd be mad. You'd be mad not to.
Yeah.
You'd be absolutely mad.
Because as if the superior facility isn't going to result in 12 more people a year.
A year. And how our facility is, you walk in and you enter a foyer. If you continue down a hallway, you get to the main gym. But if you walk up the stairs, you get to this floor, which you can see now. And if you're watching this, you'll be able to see that, there's a gym outside my office. There's also a, gym downstairs. People walk up the stairs and go, wow, this is amazing. I'm like, did you see downstairs? They're like, is there a downstairs? And I'm like, oh yeah, this is the second gym. This is the rehab gym.
It's like that stick of my other car's a Porsche. It's like
and so
that's
what
not
the
a
facility. Yeah, exactly. The facility has brought. It's really now set the standard in Sydney. I know there is a lot more competition in Melbourne.
It's set the standard. Let's be frank. It's set the standard in the whole country. For a little while, I feel like we had the best high performance center in terms of the facility.
Super impressive, yeah.
And then I saw yours, and I was like, damn it! But great inspiration too, because you've set a standard, but also I think you've shown a way to actually make it work. Because I reckon like 90% of our industry is people who are saying they train athletes, but they can't make enough money doing it. So they're doing all these other workarounds to make it work, and they're selling education, even though they've only been in the industry for 2.5 years, and they're doing this, they're doing that. I think what you've done is shown, actually, here's a model, and it's the integrated health model. So I was a little peeved, and I was like, all right, challenge accepted. That's amazing what they've done. We need to learn from that. The integrated health has been the big. Would you say it's clearly a vision where I think we've all got, if we want to create this high performance unit replica? Has it surprised you how well that's gone?
Yes,
compared to expectations,
especially because we have not marketed it at all. that has probably been the big surprise for us. That our fastest growing vertical is now rehab, by a factor of 2 or 3. For every 4 athletes that join, probably 3 of them are rehab. And that doesn't mean that ADP growth or our performance program growth has slowed all that much. That's just all new revenue that we haven't experienced up until, mid of last year when we started this. So it's really transformed the business in a way that is hard to describe. And the opportunities that Lachie and I have in front of us now, we couldn't have imagined having 2 years ago. We couldn't have fathomed it. But you know what's quite crazy? It was actually one of the easiest things to do.
Right.
Like it's not rocket. What we've done is not rocket science. It's really basic. But what it required was us to go, hang on, we need to start to really assess the KPIs of physio right now and really look at, is it actually working? Is physio in the clinic model, session by session, actually delivering incredible outcomes? If you asked 100 people who went to physio, what would they say? And we realized that most athletes not only would have wanted something more with their rehab, but they probably didn't even know that what we're doing now is possible for rehab. When we have these conversations, it's almost like we see a light bulb moment when they realize that rehabilitating an injury and frequent training goes hand in hand. It's like, the idea, they're like, can I come in, at other times outside of my physio session? We're like, yeah.
We want you to.
The whole point.
Yeah.
We want you in 5 times a week. The moment you can run, you'll join the running programs that we have out on the field, and then you'll be in here 3 times a week, but you'll also see the physio. And we integrated the systems we already had in place with our performance program, repackaged it, changed the personnel, and ran a rehab program.
Yeah.
At a fixed fee.
Brilliant. Yeah.
It was, it wasn't rocket science.
It's a courageous move that I think people don't like. So there are people who are disruptors who like disrupting things, and there are people who just want to kind of stick in the status quo. And you're a disruptor, and so is Lachie. So you've got 2 disruptors from different ends of the equation. Quite happy to attack that. It's something that we've thought about literally since before the business started. But it's always been like, oh well, we don't want to annoy any physios, we've been treading lightly. But I actually think I think your model does much better of a job of being a service to athletes, because it makes them do the things they need to do to get great results.
Yeah. That's a good point. So let's play on this, because this is a really important thing to talk about. Notice who you were concerned about then. I might upset physios.
Yeah.
Since when
do
physios
mates?
pay your bills?
Physio mates.
Yeah, but when do they pay your bills? They never pay your bills. Athletes pay your bills.
Yeah.
So what Lachie and I decided was that we cannot give a fuck about what they think, even if they think of us poorly, even if the industry thinks we've somehow done something wrong by them.
Yep.
We can't care. I'm not saying don't give a fuck. I'm saying we can't give a fuck. That there's a difference.
Yep.
Because what we needed to do was to keep the focus on the people who we care about. And we care about athletes, and we care about their outcomes. And we were sick and tired of seeing athletes who are 18 months, 24 months post an ACL who still don't feel comfortable running. And we're like, this person deserves more support. This is a dream that is putting on hold. And realistically, Lachie put out an Instagram post a couple of days ago. Our job is to make sure that the physical breakdown of their body is not the reason someone walks away from their dream. We want someone to walk away because they didn't make it and their career's now their priority, or whatever reason.
Maybe they weren't good enough, maybe they got sick of it, but not because their body failed on them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we were sick and tired of seeing that. And so we were sick and tired of seeing their body fails them, so then they gave up.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't want to see that anymore. And so as long as we kept that focus, we knew that no matter, and we have our detractors, we've said in our podcast, we've been called all sorts of things before. We know that people don't like us, and that's okay. It's okay.
Can we touch on that a little bit? So I see you as having an abundance rather than a scarcity mentality. So, and I've always been the same. So you being awesome doesn't steal from the potential awesomeness that I can have. We can both be awesome, has always been, my view. But it's not an of course, because a lot of people, it's very common, and I think it's particularly common in Australia, where one person's getting higher makes another person feel lower. And I think that's, and the more that the industry you're in is like a small town, the more exacerbated I suspect that effect is.
Maybe that's a good point. So let's take the tech industry. The tech industry is so much larger that a software as a service who's competing against another software as a service, they realize actually there's enough microchips to go around.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a computer. There's enough people who need this. It's probably good if there's MYOB, Xero, QuickBooks,
it could be a category builder. It could be better for the industry to have a few people playing
because now more people are going, actually, I'm going to use this type of service rather than going to a traditional bookkeeper, and it creates a larger market share. So, maybe they're looking at it this way. And that's how we look at what we're doing, is if we can shift the paradigm and get more people valuing integrated approaches, more athletes valuing integrated approaches than the separate or distinct approaches of see your physio and then start training once you're better.
Yeah.
If we can get more people thinking the way that we think about rehab, that helps us and it helps everyone else. And
you build the category.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we've tried to make that apparent because we're more than happy to share our ideas. I'm on this podcast, Lockie goes on far more many than I do. And when we're not closed books,
I think it's great.
We share our thoughts. But perhaps it's because, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Lindy effect. The Lindy effect says, for as long as something has been in existence for, it's a good prediction that it will be there for at least double that length of time. So if you look at the newspaper, if newspapers have been around for 400 years, it's a good prediction that it'll be around for at least another 400 years. If something's been around for only 1 year, it's a prediction that you can at least say it's probably going to be around for at least one more year. It's essentially a doubling of its existence over time. So if a business has a Lindy effect, it means that it's going to last a long time. If you look at physio, certainly the physio model in Australia, it hasn't changed since its inception. And because of that, it's probably likely to be around for a long time still to come, and people are attached to that. Go try and speak to a 30-year vet physio who's had his one clinic and his 3 employees and his 4 rooms and the same lease for 25 years, that he should open a gym and actually integrate it and do fixed fee and not charge session by session, and that make this way more accessible. And he'll say you're mad.
Yeah.
He'll say you're crazy. And so people are probably, perhaps a lot of practitioners are feeling like they're still bound by that. But it's interesting when we observe about the up and coming physio, notice that there's a big shift in conversation. They're really interested in exercise. They're really interested in exercise as the solution. They're moving away from dependency on the plinth. So there's this change as people are kind of realizing maybe there's a better way. But
it's a very interesting time. That convergence is really interesting, and I think there's the opportunity to leverage, as you guys have done. I think you can leverage that convergence and you get just a better outcome for literally everybody in the equation. Okay, so that concludes part 1 of this episode. Tune in next week for part 2, and we'll see you all then.